Microsoft Loop is a productivity tool that allows you to organize all your projects, tasks, and notes in one space where you can think, plan, and create using one application that links pages of notes and other Microsoft applications like Excel all together. It is essentially Microsoft's in-house version of a software called Notion, which I've used for many years. So in this video, I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison between Notion and Microsoft Loop to show you the real differences and advantages of each of these softwares. So let's start with the design of the actual software. So once you're in the main pages of the software, you can see Notion is on the left and Microsoft Loop is on the right. And you can immediately see how similar these software are to each other. So you can see I just added an icon. They're almost in the exact same position. You can add a cover here. You have your main title of the page, right? Projects, and then you have basically what you call like blocks in Notion, and then same over here, you can see it's almost like the exact same 6 dots. So it's kind of like almost an exact copy of how Notion organizes pages. Adding elements is also very similar. So if you see over on this side, so we'll start with Notion, if you do a backslash, you have a ton of options. You can add headings, you can add tables, you can add notes, pictures, videos, whatever you want. And then same thing over here. If I do a backslash here, you also have the same kind of drop down list. You can see they look slightly different, and Microsoft Loops is slightly smaller just because it's a newer application. They haven't added all their stuff yet. So you can add images, you can record a video, planner, and then same thing over here. You keep scrolling. There's tons of applications in here. You can embed looms and all kinds of things. So that is how you add things to your Notion or Loop page. So it's almost like Lego blocks where you just keep adding different things to make up notes, and then you can link to other applications outside of this specific software. Before we get into a side-by-side comparison of some of the elements that you can add to these pages, I do want to go over the structure. So there are some slight differences, especially when you use certain words. So on Notion, on the left, you have this breakout panel, right? So you can pull that out. Microsoft Loop also has this sidebar as well, so you can click that. It does cover it when you have it like halved, but it does pop out when you have it in full screen. So you can see, okay, it's starting to look kind of similar, but there are some key differences in the workspaces. So here we have this is called a workspace in Notion. It's your individual account. So you can have multiple accounts. You could have an account associated with a certain email address, and you can have another account with a different email address. So that's just your account. They call it a workspace in Notion. However, in Microsoft Loop, they use the word workspace in a completely different way. They use it as grouping. So there's actually, outside of this page, there's actually one more layer back. So if you click this Loop button, so you've clicked that, here are all your workspaces. So these are individual buckets that they group things into. It is equivalent to a team space in Notion. So a team space is over on this left-hand panel, right? So you can have 3 workspaces, a personal one, Rao Labs, which is my business, and then a YouTube workspace, where I have YouTube members in this one, company people in this one, and then my personal stuff in here. So you can have 3 different groupings, right? That is equivalent to having like 3 different groupings in a team spaces. So you can see Rao Labs would be the same as that one. It would be one and the same, but they call these workspaces and they call these team spaces in Notion. So they are not the same. When they say a workspace in Notion, they're referring to your individual account, which would be equivalent to your Microsoft account. You would have to sign into a new account to see other workspaces within Loop, but that is equivalent to seeing multiple team spaces within Notion. So team spaces are the same thing as workspaces. However, Notion does not have this layer, right? Like you log into Notion, it looks like this. You don't have that extra layer where when you log into Microsoft Loop, this is the first thing that pops up. They say, pick a space that you want to work in. I kind of prefer it to be Notion's way because I can kind of flip between, where I have to pick. Let's say I want to come in here. If I want to switch, I have to click this and switch between my workspaces in Loop, where it's kind of nice in Notion to have it all in one area so I can switch between my team spaces in Notion really easily. And it's just a bit easier than working in Microsoft Loop. How I get around that in Microsoft Loop is to actually go into your back page, right? So start in the beginning, and I create a workspace. Let's create new workspace. I just make a personal one, and what I do is I click this one, and then in my projects, and I just have Para method, which is like Tiago Forte's method for organizing things. I make a page for each one of my workspaces, and that way I can just work in this one workspace and get to the other workspaces, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like I'm almost forcing it to look more like Notion so that I can have these drop downs similar to how Notion has it, so that I can easily navigate and I don't have to jump through here. I could just go to here, and then there's a link to the other workspace, which is really fun. Now that we kind of understand the structure, let's go ahead and go back to where I was to get these exactly the same. So here we have the same exact situation going on. Now, when it comes to adding elements, right, features into these software, you have to add pages, and that's kind of the building block of these softwares. So what you can do, and if I expand this on the right, in Microsoft Loop, you can add a bunch of pages within a page. So you can either click here, add a page or link, so you can do new page or new link. So you can click this new page, and it's just going to generate a brand new page. You can pull from a template here, you can add a little icon, you can add a name, and build it out like that, and then you can add what's called a subpage. So you can click new subpage, and you can kind of embed and kind of build like these really nice notes. Now the link is also very cool. You can click this new link and you can paste in anything in Microsoft, like a PowerPoint presentation, just like, you know, when you share it, like a PowerPoint presentation, copy link, paste it in here. It will auto generate this text to display name, which is really cool, and the address as well, and then press add. So I went and grabbed a link off my PowerPoint presentation, so I can go in here, press Control V, and then it automatically pulls in the icon. It knows this is a PowerPoint presentation, hidden potential of Teams, press add, and then it will add it as a link. And it's kind of cool because then you can drag and drop it, like drop it under here, and kind of start building out your notes. You could call this like presentations, and then start building out, you know, your presentations, and put links, and then you can put notes, and you can start adding these pages and subpages. Now, if we go to Notion, on the other hand, their pages are slightly different. So let's take a look. So if I wanted to do something similar, right, I need to add a page. So if we go to private, all I do is click this, add a page. It's very similar to how Loop does it. So let's take a look. So you can do this, and then you can ask get started with. It has some options, and this is basically just a page. But what I like about it is pages in Notion don't have to be just pages. They can be databases. They can be a table. So you can start out with a table or a board. So if I just click table, this no longer is a page. It's a table, right? So you can't add more components down below here. It is now just a table page. It's not really a page anymore, where Microsoft Loop, and this is the biggest difference, is it's a page. You can add tables to your page, but it's not going to be the whole page itself. I can add other things, right? I can type down below, where Notion, on the other hand, you can have it be a page and then embed tables within that page, or you can have literally your page be a table, so where you can't add anything in here. And you'll understand like why this is a huge difference in a second here, because you can create relationships between your pages, tables, all that stuff, which Microsoft Loop does not have that capability yet. Okay, so let's go back to just our project page. So we understand that Notion, you can have an actual page be an entire table or a Kanban board or something like that, so it can be exclusively that. But you can also do the same thing that you have in Microsoft Loop, where you have just embedded tables, Kanban boards, all that. So let's start with the Kanban board, because that is personally one of my favorite features in Notion. Now, typically I'll usually just have the page be a Kanban board, but you can also embed a Kanban board into the page. So let's just compare them. It's called a board in Notion. So if you take a look at this, here is your board, right? If you do the same thing in Microsoft Loop, it's called a Kanban board. So it's just slightly different. So look for board in Notion and Microsoft Loop for Kanban board. And you'll see it looks similar, right? So this says untitled, so let's just call this a Kanban board. just to make it look as similar as possible. Now, the Kanban board I do like in both applications. The biggest difference that I see within the Kanban boards is the fact, well, there's several, but the first one is the cards are huge, for one. They're massive, and you can drag them and drop them kind of like here, but you can't customize these cards. So you can customize the properties of the cards. So if you go here, view details, you can add fields like labels, votes, people, date, numbers, that you can customize that part, but you can't customize the appearance of the card. There's no way to say, I don't want to see the work owner, right? I just want to see the description. Where in here, you can actually customize what you want to see on the card. So you can see properties, and you can add the status, and it changes the card view, right? Or I could say, look, I don't want to see this, and I don't want to see this, or, you can change it and make it look as big or as small as you want it. Like, it's very customizable. And that's one thing that like I absolutely need to be able to do. I hope Microsoft Loop adds this in the future, because these cards are huge, and I like to have I like to have thinner cards. And so that's a huge difference. Other than that, they do have the same look and feel. You can add columns, you can add properties. I will say there are a little bit less properties in Microsoft Loop than in Notion. So if we take a look to customize this card, you can see all these different properties, way more than I think, 6 different properties. There's a ton more. You can even add connections down here as well. So there are a lot more options in Notion, but I'm assuming Microsoft Loop will add those eventually. A major difference here within the property field is you don't have a relation property in Microsoft Loop, so that you can't relate to other Kanban boards or other tables. There is no relation field, where in here, this is one of my favorite fields. It's called a relation. You click that and you can link to any other database that you have within Notion. So you can kind of link them together. So I like to tag things on dates or where I travel and stuff like that. And that's very helpful in Notion. I'm assuming they're going to add that to Microsoft Loop, but I have not seen it yet. And that's kind of what holds me back from fully jumping on the Microsoft Loop train. And there is one other difference as well here. So let's just go ahead and take a look. This is actually the type of views that you can see. So you can see this looks pretty similar. There it says board view, and then here you're in a board view. So you can switch between views. Now, if you click this, you can only do a board or a table view within Microsoft Loop, right? There's only 2 options. Here you can add you can add a board, you can add a timeline, you can add a calendar, a list, a gallery. A gallery is absolutely essential for me in my virtual Notion library. So I need to have these options where I'm assuming, again, I think they might add them in the future, but it's not up to date with how many different views you have within Notion. So that is something, another drawback within the Kanban board is you can only switch between 2 different views in Microsoft Loop. Now, if we go one by one, starting from the left, you have, the different switch views. That is the same here. And then here we have a sort. You also have a sort here. It's even the same icon. And then you have a filter here, which is equivalent to this filter as well. So that's also the same. And then you have actions over here. So this is called rules in Microsoft Loop. And I believe you can add automations. Yeah, so there's an automations option in Notion. So it's called automations in Notion, and it's called rules in Microsoft Loop. So those are equivalent as well. They're very similar. There is no search, which I found interesting. The search is basically in your filter. You just filter on the title name. I don't know why there's not a search in Microsoft Loop. Like, see how there's a little search icon? I don't know why there isn't one in here. It drives me absolutely nuts. So you have to actually go and filter and select the title and then contains, and then you can search for the name here and apply. That's their equivalent of a search. I don't know why they don't just add a search. Now, there aren't these 3 little dots where you can customize a lot of things. There is none of that in Microsoft Loop. In Notion, there's lots. You can change the layout, you can change properties, you can add all this extra stuff, where Microsoft Loop just doesn't have these options. Again, these are just features that need to be added eventually down the road. Now, there is one really cool feature that you can do in Microsoft Loop, which I haven't seen in Notion. It might exist somewhere, but I haven't seen anything quite like it. It's called a loop component. Now what you do is you grab a hold of this guy. And Microsoft Loop's a little finicky, I'm not gonna lie, when it comes to grabbing items. But if you click here a couple times and click create loop component, is kind of cool. You can export to Excel, but we won't get into that right now. You can create a loop component. Now you go ahead and click that. It names it component 2, which I already tried this with component 1, so I'm assuming that's why I picked the 2. I have no idea how to change the name so it doesn't say component 2. If anyone out there knows how to do that, I have tried for the life of me to rename this, but it adds this purple thing around it. And you actually can copy this component, right? Or share it. So I would copy it, and then you just have to add allow, and then it says people in my workspace can use this. So if I have this, I can now paste it into an email and it's live. You can put it pretty much anywhere and it's a live loop component, so anyone can update it on any of the Microsoft platform applications, and then I will see the updates on the loop side. Now that you copied it, you can actually paste it into an email. So I'm just gonna throw this in an email, press Control V, and you see my component is now pasted in here. Now let me zoom out so you can see it. Now anyone can move this card within this component. So if I email this to my friend or my colleague, they can move it, and you saw it got moved down here. So when I move it back, you'll see it auto updates, and it shows who is moving it, which is very cool. Now I love this because it's on a Microsoft application, right? Or a platform. So if you are working on a Microsoft platform, this is perfect for working with coworkers and all that kind of stuff. That's why I'm excited for Microsoft Loop to copy Notion, because it's going to be great if you work at a Microsoft company. Now that we looked at Kanban boards, which is one of my favorite things to do inside the software, the next thing we're going to do is looking at how to connect or link to other pages. So let's start with Notion on the left. I'm just going to add like a little markdown, just a hashtag and a space, and let's call this link to page. Now, Notion does leave you a little bit of space where Microsoft Loop, you have to like enter to get some space, where Notion will just leave you some space down here. So just keep that in mind. It is a little bit finicky when it comes to that. And let's do link to page. So in Notion, how I usually go is I do a backslash and do link to page. That is just how I've always done it. And then I can link to, let's say, health. And it looks kind of pretty. There's a nice link. In here, the best way to do it is an @ and then you can link to YouTube. Like, let's just link to YouTube, right? And there's that. It does look a little chunkier and it's not as pretty because it's not very obvious that's a loop component because it literally has a SharePoint icon. So you're like, what is going on? But I will say the advantage with Microsoft Loop here is if you do the @ symbol and you're like looking for files, you can literally link your Microsoft files, where in Notion you can't do that, right? Because it's not a Microsoft application. So this is the one thing I do love about linking things within Microsoft Loop, because it's on a Microsoft platform. So if you work at a company that is on a Microsoft platform, this makes it really easy to link all your spreadsheets, all your PowerPoints, everything that you've been working on without having to dig around to go find them, right? Next, let's look at web links. So this is anything that's on the web. It's another thing that I like to do. So we'll call web links, and we'll do the same thing over here. And let's scroll down. We'll do a little enter. I know it's kind of annoying there. Okay, so let's say you have copied a website copied a URL. So you're referencing a website. You're like, here's the docs, here's this. So I'm just going to use my website. Just Control V into here. In Notion, you have a couple different options. You can paste it as a mention, which is kind of pretty. It's kind of cool. It's very minimalistic, which I love. It's new too. Or you could create a bookmark. So that's what this looks like. Or finally, you can create an embed. So then it almost looks like the actual website. So this is really good if you're looking for website inspiration. You can paste them here and then you can kind of expand or however you want to see it. 3 different options. Within Loop, you really just paste it in and you get what you get. You could change this to a URL. There is that option. It's kind of hard to grab it, to change it. But I have been able to do it before, but again, it's kind of finicky with the Microsoft Loop. They're gonna get there, hopefully. But you can change that to a regular URL. I've seen a lot of people do that. You can basically right click. It's almost like this block. If you can get it to hover to get that block, then you can right click and change the URL type. But then it'll just be a regular URL, which is not fun. Okay, so now let's compare videos. So when you paste a video, this is another thing that I like to do. Again, this is for note taking. So you're gonna paste web links, you're gonna paste videos, you're gonna paste Excel files, anything that you're using on a regular basis. So let's look at how videos are done. So let's do videos and we'll compare them again side by side so we can take a peek. So let's start with Notion again. Control V, paste as mentioned, right? Which is kind of nice, it's cute looking. And then you could do the same thing, create a bookmark, or let's embed video. Let's do that. It's looking nice. And then we can create a bookmark. So again, 3 different ways. All 3 look semi-nice. So let's take a look what it looks like here. And Control V. Again, you don't really have that pop-up that asks you what you want. It just does it. I will say, I kind of love Microsoft Loops embed better. I mean, it just looks prettier. Like the YouTube things on here, there's a little wrapper around it. You can play it. This isn't curved or cornered. I like my edges curved, cornered edges. And, but I do like this mention, but I will say, I think Microsoft Loop might win this one in the sense of embedding videos. It just looks, for me, it looks prettier. And now a couple honorable mentions when it comes to Microsoft Loop, because I know a lot of the comparisons Microsoft Loop has been kind of losing when compared to Notion. I do want to give it a couple honorable mentions. When you are looking for embedding Microsoft apps like Planner, I will say it performs very well. So if I want to embed a planner, go ahead and press insert, and it's pretty. Like it formats really well. And again, I think we're gonna see this more and more because it's a Microsoft platform, right? It's an application through Microsoft. So of course they're gonna make their stuff work cohesively together. And again, you can move stuff in your planner board and then it will move it in the actual planner. So you don't even have to go into Planner. You can just embed it in here. The other thing I thought was cool was this record a video. So you can go ahead and record any video you want. Now I'm gonna press allow, but I'm gonna probably cancel this because my camera's already in use, so it's gonna tell me no. But if you do record, it will save it in OneDrive, which is very cool. So I'm gonna close this. Hopefully I can get out of here. But that is something that I thought was really cool, where you can record a video and then just keep it in here. It also works really well if you have Stream. So through Microsoft, they own Microsoft Stream. You can embed your streams in here. So I've been doing that a lot at work. I'll record a meeting in Teams and then download it through Teams and paste the link from Microsoft Stream in here, and it embeds it really nicely. And then if you have out of office notes from people who are going out and they want to meet with you really quick, you can embed them into one out of office page for that person. And that's why personally I've been doing when I cover other people. I have them meet with them and then I put all their notes, the videos, all in one little session in Microsoft Loop, which is really nice. And I don't think it would be as nice through Notion because it's on a Microsoft platform in Microsoft Loop. So I kind of have to go back and forth a lot. Okay, that was a lot of information. Now, if you're like just as confused as I am, and you're like, oh my gosh, which one do I use? Like, you gave cases for both software. Okay, take a step back and think big picture. If you are on a Microsoft platform at work, 100% you should download Loop and play around with it. If you've never touched Notion or Microsoft Loop and you're at a Microsoft company, I suggest starting with Microsoft Loop because they're going to add more and more of these features, I hope, down the road because they're trying to basically copy Notion. So I would stick with Microsoft Loop if you haven't touched Notion, right? And you're on a Microsoft platform. Now, if you haven't touched Notion or Microsoft Loop and you're not on a Microsoft platform, you're on a Google platform and Slack and kind of less corporate vibes, stick with Notion. I use Notion personally, and I also use Microsoft Loop. So if you're like me, now that was, those cases. Microsoft, stay with Microsoft Loop. If you're not on a Microsoft platform, stay with Notion. Those are easy. But if you're like me and you have, your personal life, and then you also have you're on a Microsoft platform as well, but you know that Microsoft Loop is not as strong as Notion and you like Notion more, then this is how I do it. I have Notion where I keep all my personal stuff, like my finances, YouTube, business, all that jazz in Notion. And then at work, I use it just for collaborating with coworkers and taking notes with coworkers. So if it's a personal project or if it's even a work project, then I will stick mainly with Notion if it's by myself. But if I have to collaborate with other people and I'm on a Microsoft platform with other people, I will stick with Microsoft Loop. So that's how I deal with it. That's how I'm like, if I'm working with people and I'm at Microsoft and I'm on a Microsoft platform, I'll use Loop. If I'm personal by myself, I will use Notion. So I kind of mix the two. I would love to migrate to one software or the other, but for me, it's just not realistic because there are advantages to both software. So that's how I kind of delineate it. If you want to see how I use Notion from a day-to-day basis, I will link my video that I did on here. It's called Building a Second Brain. I kind of run through a lot of what I'm using Notion for. Eventually I'll film a more up-to-date version, but it is a really good video if you want to see how to organize your stuff using Notion. Again, this video came out when Microsoft Loop was not a thing, but it's a good idea to go and look and see how other people are using the software as well. So check that out. Otherwise, I will see you guys next time.